Hello, and welcome to Hear4Health, where we try to give you the information that you can assess best for yourself and your own health values. We're starting a series of conversations and interviews in this section of Hear4Health, which involves community health, because although we can talk as much as we want about how your health is, your emotional health, physical health, spiritual health, we really don't know too much about the community that surrounds us. And that community ideally is something that supports your health and growth. So I'm very, very pleased to announce their incorporation today with our guest, Dee Angwin, who is a chicken enthusiast and has been involved in both the commercial and the residential use of chickens and has been contributing to the community, of which I'm a part as well, of Corrales. So I'd like very much to introduce Dee.
Hello.
Hi. We were having a great conversation before we started taping about Dee's experience in the field of chicken husbandry. Is that the correct term?
Yes.
Okay, good. I want to make sure. So tell us about how you got involved with chickens in the first place.
Oh, a lifelong passion. Unfortunately, when I grew up, we lived in a community that didn't allow chickens, and so I had to wait till I went to college, and then I had a couple there, and then when I finally graduated out of college, got married, and moved to the California foothills country, I was able to start raising poultry, and I went in, dove deep.
Did you? It was a deep dive?
It was a deep dive. I raised turkeys for Christmas. So basically I sold my Thanksgiving turkeys and that was my Christmas fund. I also raised meat birds, I raised laying birds, and I sold geese, raised and sold geese. So incubating eggs and the whole 9 yards.
Wow.
It was a deep dive.
And you've done that for many years, right?
Right. I've moved to Corrales and now it's scaled back quite a bit. I don't think my neighbors would like, that much activity on the farm, but I do have 9 hens and 1 rooster that are happily ensconced in their little homemade coop, and they're producing very well. And when you have a lot of eggs, you get very popular, especially in these times.
Yes.
With the community. So.
Well, you've been selling your eggs at, I won't even say the price, we're not going to go there, but it's a very reasonable contribution to the village of Corrales and to the access of having food for us as residents, and as well as part and parcel of being part of that network. So tell me a little bit about why you, when you moved out here from California, from...
we went from California, and then I moved to Las Vegas, Nevada, which is not real great for raising chickens, but I did hatch out eggs, and I sold them and gave a flock to my sister, and very surreptitiously in my garage, because the HOA wasn't real happy about the prospect of chickens in the community. And then when we moved out here to Corrales, voila.
Well, you had just pointed out that the major thrust of the community in Corrales is agricultural, and
correct.
So that's
agriculture. I'll say basically food related.
Yeah.
So, but of course, Corrales is the horse capital of New Mexico, and luckily nobody's eating the horses.
So hopefully that'll stay the same.
Hopefully that stays the same. But there is quite a lot of poultry out there. And I'm happy to have contributed both with the eggs and also getting people started in the poultry hobby.
Well, I'm fascinated by your story, which I'm going to go back to about your Christmas turkey, but for right now, because that's such a great story, I'll just lose my train of thought. The idea that you can actually grow your own chickens and keep your own little husbandry with your chickens and have eggs for yourself and your family, that's a fascinating concept to a lot of people, and a lot of people don't feel they can do it.
Well, I think the main hook on it is that if you've had a store-bought egg versus a homegrown egg, you become an egg snob real quick.
Yes, you do.
And there is nothing quite like fresh eggs.
Have you had ducks?
I have had ducks. They were basically on the pond when I lived in California. But excellent for baking.
That's what I
The,
hear.
the eggs. Well, the ducks too.
Yeah, but we're talking chicken eggs for the moment.
Yep.
Yeah, you're right. But they're tasty because I had some ducks. I had khaki Campbell ducks, and I was shocked by those. My goodness, they were prolific. It's
Yes.
like the average egg for a hen, for a duck actually, right, for a female duck, which is a duck, not a drake, is something like 340 eggs a year. That's average production for the khaki Campbell, but they're just rail thin, and that's their whole energy goes into egg production. So
Yes.
what kind of chickens do you think perhaps someone who's interested in doing a coop would do?
Well, it would depend on what purpose you want the chickens for. If you're raising them for meat, you want a meat chicken. If you're raising them for eggs, you want a production bird. If you're into, I want the chicken to lay every single day for X amount of time. The problem with raising production birds, though, and they're a lighter breed. They're like a leghorn versus an Orpington, which is a big, fat, English-looking chicken, whereas the leghorn is what is known as a Mediterranean-style chicken. The Mediterranean-style chickens are production birds, and they will lay, but their egg production life is short.
Oh.
And egg production is hard on birds.
Imagine.
So you need to keep their feed up if you want them to live long. Otherwise, they'll burn out at about a year and a half for eggs, and then their life expectancy is pretty short.
Wow. So do you use them after they're through laying as meat bird or stew? Or?
Well, there's a lot of Campbell chicken noodle soup that's former laying birds, yes.
Oh, I see. I
Yeah.
see. So you mentioned feed, and you've told me about how you looked at the feed. You did a real interesting evaluation. Could you tell us about that?
Well, let me just preface this by saying that if you are going to raise chickens for egg production or raising chicks, or chickens that you're hatching out the eggs and you're raising chicks, and or you're shipping eggs, you definitely want a higher protein than what's your standard sort of general commercial feed. You're going to have to do the higher protein because it takes a lot out of the birds.
Sure.
But the higher the protein, the happier chicken. If your protein is too low, you're going to have a lot of feather plucking going on because feathers are very high in protein.
Keratin, yeah.
Free-range chickens, they need a little bit of supplement. I will admit that my chickens are white bread junkies. Probably the worst thing you could feed chickens, but I buy the bags of rolls and we do bakery bowling. We just roll that into the coop and it's like a big
It
rugby.
never gets to the end.
Yeah, it's a rugby scrum. It's highly entertaining. But when we do that, we also have to throw in a handful or two of mealworms because they're like 50% protein, and that will offset the
lack of
lower
protein.
Right.
Interesting. So you say higher protein. Does commercial chicken feed have an adequate?
Your average chicken feed is about 16% protein.
Okay.
I find that chickens are really happy around 18 to 20%.
Okay.
If you get them up to 22%, they're fat and happy. But if you back off from that 20%, they start looking for other ways to supplement that high protein that they're used to.
Sure.
But when I had my breeding birds that were producing the chicks and were producing the eggs for shipping, my protein was up 22, 25%.
Wow, those must have been fabulous eggs.
Well, most of them went to producing other chickens. It was a fairly rare breed of bird at the time that had a certain color egg that everybody wanted, and you don't get those from commercial hatcheries. You have to go to breeders. And so for a while there, I dabbled in let's create the super dark chocolate colored egg.
Yeah.
And that was fun, but the birds were not, even though they did pay for themselves, they didn't lay up to my production standards. So now I'm back into just egg producing.
So you use like leghorns or?
No, actually I started doing the Gregor Mendel thing. I took
genetics.
Genetics. I took my original birds and I said, okay, I want to breed blue feathered olive eggers. So I did that for a while, and it's like, okay, now I want to breed rainbow layers by adding this particular rooster to that particular set of hens. And it was very interesting because the rooster I got was supposedly an olive egger. It turns out he's not. He's actually an Easter egger because all the chickens started laying eggs and they were all just brown eggs.
Oh,
I was expecting this plethora of greens and pinks and blues and whatnot, and they all started laying brown eggs. But we've surmised that he has a production gene somewhere in his background because once my chickens started laying, they have been laying at almost 95% production. I mean,
wow.
nine birds laying an egg a day.
That's impressive.
Since December.
And they're all fertile eggs.
They're all fertile eggs.
If he's doing his job, that is.
He's very happy.
Well, he's got nine hens with him,
He's real content. He's just very
a happy
mellow.
guy.
He's mellow. Yes.
So would you recommend that? So essentially, if I'm hearing you correctly, the presence of a rooster in the coop increased productivity, or was it just the gene?
No. I strictly had them for breeding purposes. You do not need a rooster in order to have laying hens. They will lay. And one chicken will will be the dominant hen, and she will act like the rooster short of mounting the other chickens. Well,
Sure.
she might also mount the other chickens.
Sure.
Chickens are very unusual animals. But she will do the alert and round them all up and put them in the coop.
She'll take care of them.
She will take care of them, yes.
Yeah. I see. Is it, well, a lot of people are sort of turned off to roosters simply because of the noise.
Noise, and a lot of people sadly have had very bad experiences as children.
Oh, I've heard
where
about
roosters have chased them around and whatnot. And a lot of it, sometimes it's the breed of bird. They can just be very territorial. And I lucked out, the rooster that I got happened to have been a rooster up in Rio Rancho, where roosters are not allowed. He was supposedly a hen and turned out that way, but he had been cuddled and loved, and he was just okay with people. He doesn't care. So I brought him into my flock, and he has been just a wonderful rooster. He's very respectful of my space. I'm respectful of his space. He's not full of bluff and bluster. As I said, he's a very happy guy.
Yeah. And you have only the 9 chickens right now, the 9 hens.
The 9 hens. I will say that sometimes the chicken population on our place bounces up, especially if I get into my hatchaholic mode and just start hatching, which everybody loves because then I've got,
What's not to love?
Love chicks to pass around, and I enable people and I replace people's flocks and whatnot. But I have had, I've got 2 brooder pens for the garage that hold upwards of 50 or so chicks apiece. Plus I had another brooder out in the greenhouse.
Now, brooder pen. Tell me what a brooder pen is.
Okay. Baby chicks, when they are born, they need heat. And normally a mother hen provides that heat. They all run under the mother hen, stay warm. But if you don't have a mother hen, then you have to have some way of providing heat. And the former way of providing heat used to be a heat lamp. But that's dangerous. I mean, a lot of fires start with that.
Yeah.
Well, now they've come out with something that looks like an inverted hot plate. It's upside down with little legs on it. So the heat's underneath, and the chickens just run underneath.
And then they optionally can decide how warm they want to be or how cold they need to be.
Right. They just go under there when they want to get warm. They come out when they're perfectly heated and go and get their food.
And that's not a fire hazard?
No, they're very very safe. Yeah.
Wow, that's nice to know. And so how do you hatch? You hatch your eggs in one of those rotating?
I have several incubators running from a very basic styrofoam box to a very fancy one that has its own humidity control and turners and various things, little LED sensors on top where it's just basically you plop the eggs in and you come back,
However much
chicks.
time.
Yeah, it's chick time.
Wow. So you've really confined yourself to 9 hens.
Yes, and that's mainly a function of my coop. The size of the coop is going to determine the outcome of your poultry project, whether it's going to be successful or whether you're going to be sad, because there will be, if you have too many hens in a coop, you're going to have disease, you're going to have picking, you're going to have egg eating, which if that happens, just
kiss it goodbye.
Yeah, kiss it goodbye, because they learn from each other. So you don't ever want to have them too crowded that it's going to impact them that way. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I understand they're really good at a mouse. I understand if a mouse is put in there, that's the end of that mouse.
A chicken is about that far off from being the perfect predator. They are total scavengers.
Wow. Yeah, they
They
are.
will
Yeah.
they will eat a piece of fried chicken if you throw it in the coop. I mean, it's just that's the way they are. They're a fun
They're
little
opportunistic.
opportunistic. A fun little fact is Jurassic Park, when
Yeah.
the dinosaur looks down into the Jeep and you see the eye. That's a chicken eye.
Oh
That
my!
they use. They based it on a chicken.
What do you call it? Unadorned, not unadorned, not CGI.
Not
CGI.
not CGI. Chickens they're little velociraptors. They truly are.
Yeah, you can see the connection between dinosaurs and fowl.
Yeah.
So turkeys. Can we talk turkey?
We can talk turkey.
So what's your experience in raising turkeys?
This was when I lived back in California. I had a ranch in Newcastle, and I dove deep into the poultry project. And I decided that to fund my Christmas, I was going to provide turkeys for Thanksgiving.
Sounds good.
And I set up my pens, and I started with the little turkeys. We had wild turkeys on the property too, but I didn't touch those. They were just, lovely ornamentation. I could call them in, and it was, great fun to tease my hunter friends. Oh, here, let me show you what.
This is what you're looking for.
Yeah, this is what you're looking for, but we got this here. And I noticed when I was raising meat birds, meat chickens, and the turkeys, that the feeds back then, and this was 30 some odd years ago, the feeds back then were laden with antibiotics. And healthful living, garbage in, garbage out, right? I was not real keen on that. And I had taken a couple of nutrition classes at UC Davis. I originally went there for veterinary medicine, sort of went into animal husbandry, and then went off into a whole nother media production, which had nothing to do with either, but I found it a lot more interesting, less chemistry. As you know, chemistry is the big bugaboo.
Yeah,
if you're,
it's an obstacle.
Yes, it is, if you're trying to become a veterinarian or anything medical related. Anyway, I thought, I'm not real happy with, this. Why don't I, make my own feed? It'll be, relatively organic. And let's up the protein on it a little bit. So I had my clientele that had all reserved their little turkeys for Thanksgiving. And lo and behold, I started feeding this feed that I had concocted. The high protein was provided via cottonseed meal, which was relatively a new feed at that point. Chickens can assimilate it. People cannot. They originally thought cottonseed meal will be great for the, feeding the world.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, it's got an enzyme in it that doesn't jive with people, but chickens and livestock can eat it. And I also supplemented it. I had horses at the time, so I would throw flakes of alfalfa into the stall, and that acted as sort of a purifier. The flavor of the meat was just surreal. It was, everybody was like, sign me up for 3 turkeys next year.
Yeah, right.
And so I started feeding this, but what I didn't realize was that it was a little too effective, and these birds just took off exponentially weight-wise. So I'm phoning up people at the beginning of November going, okay, the toms are a little ahead of schedule. Are you good with a 30-pound bird for Thanksgiving? And they
undressed. I mean, not taken. Yeah.
Well, actually, once it was, by that time, it would have been close to. I did do one of the turkeys that year, and it was 31 pounds in my oven. It barely cleared the top of the oven.
Yeah.
And so I said, I've got a lovely hen. They're going to be, probably in the range you want, and they were fine with that. So some people wanted the big birds, big showy presentation, and that's great. So processed all of these birds. I had 2 left over, and I let them sit in their pen until Easter. And I realized that they probably had gotten a little too big when the neighbor was bringing her little kid over and saying, if you don't behave, I'm throwing you in there with these birds.
As a threat.
As a threat. And the birds were, eye to eye with the, 5-year-old kid. And I'm like, oh, okay. So barter system being what it was, I had a friend who was in the restaurant business who did tile work on the side. And I had a barbecue area that I wanted tiled. So we swapped. And he had a huge oven that he could cook this bird in, and that's great. So I processed the bird, and he was a 75-pound bird, and he produced 47 pounds of big turkey. It was quite the ordeal to get him all, prepared and whatnot. And I put him in a garbage bag and, sucked the air out so that he, was presentable.
He looked a little smaller.
He didn't look that much smaller, but, you like chickens wrapped up and whatnot. So, I wrapped up my turkey. And I phoned him up and I said, your turkey's ready. Are you ready for it? And he goes, I don't have any place to store it. And I said, well, I certainly don't either. What are we going to do with this bird? So I took this chicken and I seat buckled it into the front seat of my truck. I was sitting there like a
passenger.
Like a passenger. And the solution we came up with was that he had a friend up at Baskin Robbins, and I took the turkey up there, and the turkey sat there next to the marble fudge ice cream in the deep freezer until they were ready to.
Oh my Lord!
To do it.
Were there any leftovers?
I'm sure that he probably had some. He told me that he had to put the turkey in the oven at 1 a.m, and that when it was time to take it to the table, they had nothing to carry it with, so he bear hugged it and took it to the table. They were having a big Easter feast. I had processed the other bird, and the leg thigh looked like a ham. I mean, it was huge. And
wow.
I ended up with a lot of assorted.
That must have been a terrific tasting bird, though.
Yeah, filled the freezer. And the chickens I had on the same formula. And suddenly these meat birds we called them thunder chickens. The nice thing, though, was that I had also looked at the various phosphorus ratio in them. And so they were not suffering the heart attacks that most meat birds do and splayed legs and whatnot.
Yes.
It was the same sort of formulation for horses, that you want to feed your horses really well so that the newborn foals have good tendons and whatnot. So
sure.
We incorporated a little of that, and these chickens grew huge, and I gave my sister one, and it was a 14-pound bird. And she goes, how am I supposed to cook it? I said, like a turkey.
Well, yeah, that would make sense. That would make sense. So, that's amazing. But the whole idea was that you researched. I find this whole story fascinating, of course, but you researched this and you were able to produce a result of a larger than normal, shall we say, turkey and chicken by changing the food content.
By changing the feed ratios and just using a little more, well, it would never take off commercially because it's probably too expensive to create a bag of feed with those sort of ingredients, no matter how much a factory has access to bulk produce.
Because the labor involved.
Well, the labor, but also people are going to balk at, paying X amount for a feed when they're used to paying,
It's like dog food. I mean, it's like whatever's the cheapest thing you can get to the animal. Because it does get expensive with our pets.
Yes.
Well, that's interesting. Jeez Louise. So tell me, I'm impressed by a lot of things about you, I'll tell you, Dee, but one of the things is that you have constructed coops in sort of in the outdoors, obviously, but you have been immune from coyotes stealing your chickens for more than 10 years. I mean,
yes.
I don't know anybody that has that kind of a record.
They just trot right by my coop because they know
they
that
can't get in.
Yeah. Well, the main thing is that you look at what your predators are in the area and you build accordingly. Thank goodness we don't have bears in Corrales. Otherwise, I'd have a cinder block coop. But I did build this coop, and it's got mesh on the flooring so things can't tunnel under. It's got welded wire on the sides. The coop walls are a good inch thick, but that was just basically my construction because I I built the frame, and there's inside and outside, and then I put shingles on it, which added another layer.
Sure.
So, but the main thing with coop building, and this is the newbie mistake that a lot of people make, is that they don't have an adequate size coop for the amount of birds. They buy too many birds because the chicks are so cute and they're so little and fluffy,
Yes,
and they'll fit
yeah.
in that.
Yeah.
But they grow big, and chickens need, at a minimum, well, your standard size chicken, bantam chickens, the little mini chickens can get away with less, but 4 feet of indoor coop space per bird.
4 square feet?
4 square feet. Most egg production places are like 2 feet, which is kind of sad for the bird because
Yeah, they look pretty crowded.
Yeah, they get to turn around, and that's basically it. So 4 square feet inside, and then outside 10 square feet.
Wow.
So that is why I limit myself. Ideally, to 8 birds would be my coop, but all my laying hens right now are sisters. They all hatched out at the same time, and they're used to each other. Everybody's all copacetic, and they all get along well, and it's working.
Yeah. Well, then that's all that you need to know about, is that it's working. I mean,
Yeah.
that's her goal. A friend of mine was saying that she has like 3 nesting boxes. I think she's got a dozen hens, and no rooster. But there's one particular brooding box, perhaps.
The favorite.
Yes, that is always up for grabs, and everyone's always fighting over it. All the chickens are fighting over getting in there and doing it. Is that usual? What is that, a manifestation of jealousy? Territoriality?
No, yeah, I want that condo.
Yes, exactly. I don't want that one.
And chickens are kind of particular that way. If they wait too long, they'll just go lay it at someplace else, because they just can't hold it any longer. But I have gone out to mind my particular coop, and I'll find 2 chickens in the same box. They're all squished up together. Luckily, chickens don't go, 11 o'clock, everybody needs to go lay.
A shift.
Yeah, they tend to take turns, and sometimes the box ends up being occupied by a chicken who wants to hang out there longer, maybe is having maternal instincts, I don't know, and isn't going to get off the box. So therefore, all the other chickens, go to the vacant box because that one's occupado.
What do you do when you have a broody chicken?
Oh, you cry.
Really?
I've had several of them, and I have a broody chicken. For those that don't know, is a chicken that decides that it wants to be a mommy more than it wants to be a social chicken, and so it will sit on the nest, whether there's eggs or not. It'll sit on a rock. It'll sit on golf balls. It'll sit on almost anything for weeks on end. They don't eat very well. They don't drink very well. They get all skinny and horrible. And you can shove them off the nest as often as you can, but they're just going to crawl right back on. So I decided it was easier to join them than beat them. And I put up the Barbie coop, which is a little coop that's specifically designed for this.
That's funny. The barbecue.
No, Barbie, Barbie, like in doll.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure it was B-A-R-B.
No, barbecue.
Okay.
Oh, good one.
That's where my mind went.
We have a little picture of Colonel Saunders inside the coop. Yeah. And we put her in there, and she sat happily on the eggs. And I was at that point hatching out chicks. And so at one point, I just removed the eggs and shoved some chicks under her. And happy as a clam, happy as a clam.
Did she not stop being confined to that particular site?
As soon as the chicks started moving about, she wanted to be a mommy, and she was, watching over them. And I gave her like too many chicks because I wanted this to be a one and done. You're going to get sick of these little guys. And, I left them in there with her until they were like teenagers. Sure. And she was like, I'm ready to be a chicken again. Please. But sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. This last batch, I had a broody happen, and I put her in the Barbie coop, and I got the chicks, and I put the chicks under her, and she turned into Joan Crawford. She threw them across the coop. She sent them outside in the rain. She was just like the worst mommy ever.
Well, she just wanted to be inspired.
Yeah,
she wanted to be alone.
I guess.
Like Greta Garbo.
I gave her away shortly after. And these poor little chicks, it's like, okay, I've got to raise you because, you know,
no one else
sorry
is stepping
about
up.
that.
That's funny. So what is it that, if you end up having chickens, I mean, obviously, once in a while you will get a broody one, and you will be almost replenishing. It sounds like a lot of work. Is there a lot of work to chickens?
It's a labor of love, like anything. If you're growing a vegetable garden, you do it because you like the end result and you realize that
Sure.
it's a process. Chickens are fun animals.
They are.
They do have personalities. It's great fun to park a chair at the coop and just watch chicken TV
Yes.
for a while. There is the healthful eggs. Great at refrigerator cleaner, you know, if you've got a lot of
that's
leftovers.
True. Yeah.
They will definitely help you out with that. The chicken manure is great for the garden. Some people free range their chickens, but you're just sort of asking for a coyote buffet to happen when you do that.
Yeah.
But if you do free range your chickens, they're out there eating bugs and doing various assorted things.
Doing chicken things, yeah.
Yeah, doing chicken things. They're highly
So
entertaining.
if you let them in your garden, for example, to take like the hornworms off of your tomatoes or whatever, is it safe for your plants? I mean, ignore it. I forgot to turn off my phone. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. Provided there are not ripe tomatoes there that are,
Looking really good.
Look even better. But chickens are great as they like greenery. I mean, they do like to eat, beet tops and lettuces and
So do I.
Various assorted things. So usually you let them out in the garden after you've done your harvest, and
They'll clean up everything.
They'll clean, kind of like goats, but not as efficient. But they will definitely, turn the dirt over for you, and they'll, eat the bugs and stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
Some people have, chickens that, out in their gardens all the time, and more power to them. But we have coyotes that hop into our veggie compound and take a shortcut past the chicken coop and over the other fence. They don't even look at the chickens. They just know it's pointless, and they just hop on and go on their way.
Wow. Well, there is a lot to it. I mean, there's how many months out of the year do the chickens lay?
Chickens are very light sensitive, and so 12 hours of daylight, 14 is ideal, triggers them to lay. And then when winter comes and the daylight hours get shorter, they go into, I won't say hibernation mode, but they cease laying, and that point is a good time to do your chicken maintenance. You can worm your chickens, you can dust your chickens, fatten them up for the next laying season, and keep feeding them stuff out of the refrigerator.
Yeah, exactly, because that keeps going all the time anyway.
Yeah.
So what do you think of dual purpose birds? In other words, eggs and...
There are many of those. They will lay anywhere from 180 to 240 eggs a year, which is a goodly amount.
Sure.
And figure that the winter months are going to be the months that they are not laying. They're fine. They're docile animals. High production birds are a little more skittish and flighty. Dual purpose are very docile animals. Make great pet chickens. I had a friend that I gave a flock of chickens to, and I will say that her speckled Sussex lived to be 12 years old.
Wow.
Yes, outlived her dog.
That's funny.
She was surprised about that. But she stopped laying consistently, and I think her last year was when her last egg that she, surprised. Oh, look at this, was when she was 8 years old.
But still, that's pretty darn impressive.
12 years is a long time to have a bird.
What's the average? Yeah.
Most chickens do not last long. As I said, high production birds will burn out because of all the
energy that they're
all
consuming.
the energy. I mean, it takes a lot of calcium, a lot of protein, and it's a lot of mechanics within the bird to be producing an egg every single day. And they will generally last about 2.5 years, maybe max.
Yeah.
Whereas other birds, 6 to 8 maybe.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. What about for example, what you said about phosphorus for the turkeys and the chickens also.
Calcium phosphorus ratio.
Right, because I had raised a double-breasted tom, not very bright because he put his head through the fence where my dog was, and I found him in the morning. But he had real trouble getting around. He could barely get up because his legs were splayed out, and I felt so bad for him.
Well, he was a double-breasted meat production bird, and it's like meat chickens.
Sure.
If you've ever seen a flock of like Cornish cross hens, which they're harvested at about 6 weeks old, and that's your little Cornish game hen, that size, But they will grow, and in a couple of months they're table size. But they are too heavy for their bone structure, and so they'll have the splayed legs. I've seen one at 6 weeks old eating, and it has a heart attack. It
Wow, you
squat
mentioned
up,
heart
down,
problems.
upside down, and it's and they don't make good pets. Some people get them as Easter gifts, and it's heartbreaking because they get to the point that they will basically fall asleep with their head in the feeder, and they are so breast heavy that they're always sitting on their breast, and their feathers are not very pretty, and it's just really sad. But turkeys, same sort of situation. The double-breasted birds, they get so big that they can't function as birds. There's a lot of artificial insemination in turkeys because the male turkeys, when they're like that
big, they can't breed.
They can't breed.
Yeah.
Correct.
Interesting. This I have to ask you because I want this to continue, but we have time limits. Do you have any comments and any advice that you can offer our audience about raising chickens? Please, you have the audience.
As I had mentioned before, you want to make sure that your coop is protected against the biggest predator in your area.
Okay.
And so if you've got foxes, coyotes, raccoons, you want to make sure that the coop, especially with raccoons and their little fingers, that the coop door is very, very secure. The other thing, considering the rages of bird flu going on, is you want to make sure that your chickens and wild birds do not intermingle. Some people think it's, oh, look, the sparrow is drinking out of the water pan. That's not good. A lot of the bird flu that has happened, which decimated the pasture-raised chicken industry, because these are birds that have access to the outside. Sure. Wild bird flies over the head, poops, and pretty soon you're having to destroy the whole flock. So you want to make sure that your coop is biosecure. That's the best thing I can say for chicken health is, you just don't want to bring in a chicken from the outside and throw it in there because you don't know what kind of diseases that chicken has been exposed to. The other thing is, well, there's several things.
It's okay.
My little homily is, don't name it if you may have to eat it.
That's a good one. I like that.
Yeah. And just enjoy them. They're wonderful animals. Make sure that you provide them with fresh water and good kibble. Make sure that they have calcium supplements, which is in the form of oyster shells that you can just scatter on the floor or have a little feeder, because that is what is going to make your chicken eggshells
stronger.
Well, it basically calcium in, calcium out, and if they don't have the calcium in, they're taking it out their own bones.
Right.
And you're going to lessen the life of your chicken, and your chicken probably won't lay as often because, or it will lay eggs that don't have.
So you shouldn't ever give them eggshells, I understand.
No, you can.
Can you?
You can grind them, bake them, grind them up. Okay. You just don't want to feed your chicken raw eggs because once they get the taste for that,
you're creating a problem.
Yeah. But oftentimes, for instance, if you need to supplement baby chicks, if they aren't doing thrifty, you hard boil an egg and you feed them the yolk because that's where all the nutrients, the high cholesterol, the fats, the proteins, and everything. Well, no, egg whites have a lot of protein, but most of your nutrients are in the yolk. And baby chicks can eat a hard boiled yolk, you have to crumble it up, because they're little pecky things.
But if you were to get like chickens from your local mercantile store or whatever, you can, without a mother hen, you can give them like crumbled up yolks as well as their
As well as
crumble.
their little chicken kibbles.
Yeah, chicken kibble.
Yeah, sadly, chicks they're delicate things. They need a certain level of heat. They need a certain level of food. And even then, sometimes you'll find that chicks that you get from, we'll say the hatcheries, which has, I hate to say it, a lot of inbreeding, because that's how they keep their they
production
hatch
up.
Yeah, they do production up. A lot of times, though, they will end up with things that you aren't aware of until, after you get your little chicks home. So you have the one that, just turns right all the time, or, the one that's just a little slower.
They can't poop properly. I've heard a lot about that.
Sometimes, sometimes they end up with a little crusty butt. That you have to get in there and
uncrust it. Yeah,
uncrust it.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I mean, there's so many other questions I think we're going to have you back. Well, I want to thank Dee for taking the time to come down and sharing her vast knowledge of turkeys and chickens and commercial as well as residential. I'm very interested in hearing back from people about whether this is something you might incorporate, because it would be nice to be self-sustainable if you can. And I think there's less and less issues with regulations about chickens and the ability to actually grow your own food with chickens, as for the eggs as well as for amusement, as you point out.
Right. The Right to Farm Act has been a great boon for chicken raisers.
Oh, great. I didn't know that. Well,
yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us, and Hear4Health saying goodbye. See you next time, and thanks so much. This will be posted on our YouTube channel as well as on Studio 519's podcast. Thank you so much. Hear4Health. Bye.